If you're not speaking, please mute. And if you wish to speak, either use the hand function or stick something in the chat, and I'll try and keep an eye on it. And Maria, you can remind me if I miss anybody. Okay, welcome then to, well, it should be the rearranged May board meeting happening in June, and but managed to rearrange it to most people's satisfaction. Well, I've only one apology, and that's from Jen, who couldn't make the rearrangement. She was okay for the original meeting, but can't make this. I don't think no other apologies are there. And obviously, I'd just like to welcome back Councillors Graves and Kerr, Lucy and Alan, and welcome Councillor Shiraz Khan to his first Derby Homes board meeting.
Thank you.
I don't think we've any late items, have we, Jackie?
There's no late items, Chair.
No, and any declarations of interest other than what's previously been declared?
As passed.
Okay, thank you. I've only one announcement from the chair, and that's a reminder from Jackie that now we've got the reappointment of the council members. She will be sending out the board appraisal papers, and will be keeping tabs on everybody to ensure a prompt return on them. Thank you. Are there any statements from members of the board?
No.
Okay. No questions from members of the public. So we move on to Jan, committee chair's feedback governance, though most of it's already on the agenda.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Chair. We met on the 29th of April and considered a number of reports, and as you say, two of those are actually on the agenda with the recommendations that we met at the meeting under A12 and A13. So the Derby Homes Governance Arrangements Review, and also the found it on my paper, the the viability compliance statement as well. So both of those are on as A12 and A13. We also had another report which comes every 6 months about the rule of 85 declined applications, but there weren't any of those either. So in actual fact, the only things we discussed are all on the agenda with our recommendations from the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Any
Thank
questions to Jan? No, okay. Does anybody wish to discuss any items from Part C?
No.
No, in that case, we'll move on to Part A, the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of March. If we can go through them first, purely for accuracy, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Nobody said anything, so I'll take silence as acceptance. And do you agree I sign these as a true record of the meeting? Yep, thank you. Going back again for any matters arising which aren't covered elsewhere on the agenda. Again, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maria, I think you've an update on the gas servicing.
It's
Still
in
muted.
yeah, it's in my report, Chair.
Okay, right. And 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Right, if there are no matters arising, we'll move on then to outstanding actions, which you'll see as A3. There are 2 outstanding actions. Number 2, you'll see, is already on the agenda, later on in the agenda. 1, Maria, would you want to comment on item
Yep.
1?
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to propose to the board that we further defer the review of the social value strategy so that we can bring it into line with any changes that will happen with our procurement strategy. I've kind of swiftly delegated this now to David and Sean because it does need to be linked with the supply of goods and services. And really, we do need to await the new procurement guidelines that we're expecting potentially towards the end of July following Brexit. So if that is okay with board, it will probably mean pushing that back to the end of this calendar year.
Seems to make sense to me, Maria, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any comments on that, or do we agree what Maria's just suggested?
Great.
Again, okay, that's fine. Moving on then, David, board appointments, item A4.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, if I can take it in reverse order, for the board to note the appointment by the panel of yourself and Jen, who's unfortunately unable to come tonight, and that we've actually managed to also fill 3 of the vacancies on the operational board for tenants, which is good news because that's almost a full complement now, which is moving in the right direction. The other part of it is really now that Sarah Russell has left the board, there is a vacancy for a vice chair. The board is not obliged to have 2 vice chairs, but it's traditionally had one, and normally had 2, beg your pardon. And there's normally had one from each constituency, as it were, 1 independent, 1 tenant and 1 councillor in the chair and vice chair roles. So that would naturally point towards one of the councillors. But obviously with both Jen not being here and with Councillor Khan only having literally just joined the board today, personally, I think at this stage it would be my preference, if it's possible, if the board agrees, to defer this until the 29th of July, our next meeting, which will give time for people to talk to each other about who might want to stand, etc. So, but equally, the board can decide if they wish to appoint a vice chair tonight. It doesn't have to be a councillor board member, but that's been the tradition in the past.
Any comments from members of the board?
If I could just interject, David, I think the idea that we have 3 vice chairs, I think, is sound, which backs up your argument for a postponement. I think the situation in the past has arisen where you may need an urgent signature and one of the vice chairs has not been present. So I think 2 gives you belt and braces in sort of urgent situations. And I think deferring it for till July, I think that's probably the sensible thing to do. That's just my take on it.
Okay. Any further comments, or can we agree that?
Yes. Alan, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Alan. Yes, sorry, I missed your hand. Yes, thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much. I have mentioned this before. Most, in fact, I don't know any other company or organisation that has 2 vice chairs. It seems like an unusual thing to do. I would recommend that we remove the need for a second vice chair, and we could decide that tonight. We have a chairman, we have a vice chairman. If one of those aren't available, then how far down the line do we need to go to agree something? I would recommend to the board that we remove the second position of a vice chairman on that basis.
Any further comments, Jan?
Thank you, Chair. I actually find that it's really useful having 1 person from each of the 3 sort of different categories. So an independent, a tenant, and a councillor, all involved in that sort of strategic bit of the decision making of the board and moving it things forward and working with the executive. And I think that kind of it works well having those 3 different elements. Would not want to move away from that.
Shiraz.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Jonna, what she said. I mean, it's not as if it's a paying role and, we're having to incur extra expenses. And to have 3 chairs would make it vice chairs would make it quite fair in that sense. I mean, I know what Alan's trying to say, that in most committees that it's usually chair, but this is different, that it's quite sort of a big organisation in that terms, and having councillors and independents and Derby sort of homes people, makes sense to have a vice chair from each section.
Thank you, Shiraz. Bob, are you indicating to speak again? Muted, Bob.
That's a rare occasion. I think it also helps that it gives greater transparency from all 3 constituents, and anybody watching it online as they are now, and any reports. I think it's important that they be seen, everybody's views are taken into consideration. And I think that 2 vice chairs, it may seem like, can take Alan's point, I hear what he's saying, but I also agree with what Shiraz has said and Jan says, and I just think it gives, for the public, it gives greater transparency.
Okay, Lucy.
Thank you. I feel that we ought to hear. Well, obviously Bob's here, who's been a vice chair, and he's got a view. But I think from an operational perspective, if we are going to change things from having a chair and 2 vice chairs, 1 from each of the 3 groups, I think we ought to have a report to governance to consider the implications of it. So either I think we leave it as it is, and we expect to have 2 vice chairs complementary to the chair, or we send a report to governance. My personal preference would be to stay where we are, because I don't think you change things if it's not broken, and it seems to work.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Anybody else wish to comment? Okay, well, we've had a proposal from Alan. Should we take a show of hands vote on his proposal that we?
Has it been seconded?
It hasn't been seconded. No, is there a seconder for it? Thank you. No, sorry, Alan. There's
no problem.
Not a seconder. Again, I know it's a point you've made before, and I understand the point you've made, but again, I have to agree that working with the colleagues from tenants and from councillors, I found very useful. So I'm relieved and pleased that we carry on with what we're doing. Okay, so having made that agreement, the next thing is, do we agree to defer till next meeting to allow the 3 council members to consider it and decide if they wish to take on that role, and if so, to make a decision at the next meeting?
Well, I'd like to recommend Lucy Kerr.
I'm happy to do that, but I'm also happy to postpone it to the next meeting. But I'd let people know now that I'm hoping that the next meeting will be online as now, because I won't be in Derby that day at the end of July.
I still see no doubt that we'll still be online. So
the council meetings have gone to in person.
Have they? Oh, right.
Yeah, it feels very strange.
I wasn't anticipating that. Rachel?
I was just going to make the point, the only reason we've had to go in person is because of the way the legislation has worked through Parliament and our ability to have meetings online and virtually, which is not something that the council are particularly pleased about. So I wouldn't suggest that it would relate to you here.
Oh, okay. Right. Shiraz, I've got...
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if Lucy wants to do this, then I don't have a problem in seconding her.
Well, okay, we've got a Bob.
I second Lucy's nomination.
Well, you can't. You proposed.
Oh, of course I can. Of course I can. It's all right. I've been away.
Okay.
Chair, just to correct you, Alan actually proposed Lucy, not Bob.
Was it? Was it Alan?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm obviously losing it.
Now I'm concentrating, you see.
Yeah. Okay. Shiraj, your hand is up. Is it to speak again, or is it not still up from last time?
Oh, sorry, Mike, it's still up from last time.
Okay, right. Thank you. So Lucy has been proposed and seconded by now 2 people.
As my fellow councillors are clearly happy for me to do the vice chair role, I think it would be better to make the decision today and take it off the agenda for next time and shorten the next meeting.
Okay.
Great.
Right.
Thank you both.
Is that agreed by other members of the board?
Great.
Agreed. Okay. Right. Congratulations, Lucy. We'll look forward to working with you. With that sorted, then I think that concludes item A4. Moving on to Maria, your report A5.
Thank you, Chair. Probably one of the shortest reports that I've done for a long time, but one of the most important. To take the recommendations one by one, a really important report because tonight I'm asking the board to accept and receive the final draft of the new partnership agreement with the council, and to delegate responsibility for organising the signing of the agreement to the Director of Finance and Company Secretary. It seems quite bizarre that what ended up being over 2 years worth of work in a review gets summed up in 2 sentences. If anyone does have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or Rachel's here and can answer them, but we do need Derby Homes board approval to the new partnership agreement prior to going forward to signing with the council. So if there are any questions, Chair, I'll take them now.
Okay. Rachel, would you like to add anything to that before I take questions?
No, I think I take Maria's point about length of time it's taken. I suppose there has been some stop-starting in that period of time, obviously with COVID in the middle and everything else. But I think as we reflected on the last meeting, the partnership working between Derby Homes and the council has been, phenomenally improved and really is really fabulous, I think, at the moment. And we're working really collectively on how do we support our residents and the city and those bigger, big social outcomes we need to deliver against. So I'm really, really positive the partnership agreement captures that. It gives us the flexibility to work in different ways on the benefit of our joint residents. So I would really commend it, and thank you for the work you put into getting to this stage.
Okay, right, thank you, Rachel. Alan, you're...
Yes, Mike, I'm rather find it rather odd that we have this here, because what if we decided we didn't want to do it? At the end of the day, it's like we're going to do it anyway. Why would we have this? Because we're not going to say no, we don't want it. We're going to say yes, we did want it. Surely.
I think we just need formal agreement. I mean, I entirely accept what you say. I'd agree with what you're saying, that it does seem a bit stupid, but I think we do have to have the formal agreement of the board before it's signed.
If I can just try and explain,
yeah,
it's to ensure that the chair of the board doesn't run off in a maverick fashion and sign a new partnership agreement that the board isn't happy with. That's why we have to have board approval prior to the formal signatories with the council. Otherwise, Mike could do anything.
Yeah, but in a real sense, what would we do if we said no?
If we said no, Alan, we'd have a major problem on our hands because we should have ironed it out before now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I take your point, Alan. It is very much a formality, but I would like to personally thank colleagues within Derby Homes and also at the council, because although it is a formality, the amount of work and effort that has gone in over the last few months is phenomenal. So David, thank you to you and your colleagues in Derby Homes, but I think also a big acknowledgement to colleagues in housing strategy and legal at the council.
Right. I'll take it then that the board
We're happy
gives
to approve.
its unanimous approval to this. Thank you.
Agreed.
And just to reinforce the thanks that both Rachel and Maria have said for all the hard work that's gone into this. Lucy, are you waiting to comment or are you just agreeing? You're muted.
Apologies. I'm agreeing that this is absolutely right for now, but I just wondered, and I'm sorry, it's probably in there somewhere and I haven't read every page of it, and I should have done. In terms of between now and the end point, there could be legislative or other changes that mean that this needs to be amended. And I just want to make sure that there's a process within there that is going to serve that purpose. And I'm sure it's there, isn't it? David's about to tell us.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you want to confirm that, David?
Yes, there is. There's a process for variation, and by mutual agreement, we can agree to any variation as long as it's within our M&As. So, absolutely.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you. Now
Okay.
If that's cleared up, we get a full approval. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Following on from the introduction in my report at the last meeting about the work we're doing with colleagues on localities working, there's been a lot of work in the last couple of months looking at the data and the evidence that we hold in terms of the work that our neighbourhoods team are currently involved with across the whole city. And within the next couple of weeks, we, as in myself and Claire, I'm not going to say I'm doing it because it's very much a joint effort, we will be making proposals to the council for how the future of our localities working will look in our eyes. So I think maybe the July board meeting is a little too soon, but certainly by September, we'll be able to bring back much more detail on, in particular, the Derby Homes role within localities as we move forward. And of course, not forgetting the whole agenda working alongside Community Action Derby and our other valued partners within the voluntary and community sector. So ongoing. And then the final part of my report, I am, if I'm going to be honest, a little bit surprised, but I'm still reporting positively in terms of the support that we're getting from our software provider around some of the issues that we experienced on the servicing module. I think all board members are aware of the problems that we had, but we have made really good progress. Capita have acknowledged that there are issues within the module that need to be looked at. And just before this meeting, I had another diary appointment jump in for week after next to have further discussions with Capita. So, as I say, quite surprised. Everyone knows my views. Software providers aren't always the most helpful, but we are making good progress. And as everybody's aware, Audit Committee will continue to monitor progress on this.
Right. Thank you, Maria. Right. Yeah. Charlene's agreed that this is great news. Alan, yes?
Thank you, Mike. There's just two things I want to raise on this under item 9, council implications. The first one is a superficial thing, and that is the use of the word of the phrase audit committee. The council now has an audit and governance committee, and I don't know if that makes any difference that we actually make that a proper title.
Is it? Sorry, Alan. Is it our audit committee, Maria, that's looking, or is it the council audit and governance committee?
No, it's Derby Homes Audit Committee.
It's Derby Homes Audit Committee. Yeah.
Okay, I assume that was the council one. Fair enough. Thank you. But under section 9, I just wanted to point out. I know that it was an issue I raised previously, but obviously the pension fund is still being underwritten by the council. I have to say that I am particularly concerned about that, and I'd just like some understanding and reassurance from officers that we are going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's in the next report.
Yeah, that's
Alan. That's in the finance director's report, not mine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we'll return to that. We won't let it drop, Alan. Oh, yeah. Lucy.
Thank you. I was just wondering financially whether Capita are going to pick up the tab or whether we're going to end up paying for this or not. Do we know likely cost?
No, not yet, Lucy. That will probably be the discussion at the meeting week after next.
Okay. Good luck.
It will be a broad line. If we are asking for an adjustment to be made within the system that is bespoke to Derby, we will be expected to pay. If it's something that should have been there, it will be, the cost will fall to them.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments to Maria? Otherwise,
it's nice to hear Maria talking in a positive way about software. So, you know, I know things are work in progress, but good on you, Maria. Nice to hear that.
Hey,
Yep.
small steps, Bob.
Small steps, yep.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. We'll note that your report. David, A6.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and talk you through the draft accounts. They're currently in audit at the moment. We're expecting hopefully a audit clearance meeting next week, and the fact that you've approved the management partnership agreement tonight will help with that, because hopefully within the next couple of weeks we can get that signed off at the council end. Has to go through a process at their end as well for proper sealing, etc. So it will help enormously with our discussion with external audit. External audit look at two things every year. One is, are we a going concern? And for that, they want to make sure that we've got enough cash, which we have, and that we have a contract going into the future, which until tonight, still formally, we don't have until the council signs it off. So from their point of view, that's why they need that there. But the other thing is actually Alan's point earlier, which is about the pension fund deficit. So if I tackle that first, and I'll come back to the management accounts in a second. That in effect, what happens each year is we have a defined benefit scheme, and that is assessed for the accounting purposes each year as a snapshot on the 31st of March. And it depends on the circumstances in various markets exactly how we have to then account for that deficit. And it does swing absolutely massively. I think the board members who were here last year will remember that we had a massive swing in our favour in those assumptions last year, and this year it's effectively reversed itself and gone the other way, to the tune of actually £34 million in 1 year, which I find quite astonishing from my own point of view. The key thing though is that as long as the council section 151 officer will sign the usual letter of representation to ourselves, and that is effectively that the council will continue to underwrite the pension fund scheme deficit, and what that means is that they will continue to fund our management fee with enough resources to enable us to contribute the minimum amount that the actuary of the county's pension fund, of which we are members, requires us to pay. So currently that is 14.4% of the payroll, plus a lump sum. And as some of you will recall, we've actually paid that for this year in advance back in October, which made us quite a significant saving. So that gets reviewed every 3 years, and at the last review of that, we were 106% funded in our pension fund on that set of assumptions, which are completely different to this set of assumptions. It is a bit bonkers before anybody says anything else, but effectively one way of accounting, you end up with a massive deficit. The other way of accounting, a couple of years ago, we had a small surplus. Personally, I think we will have increased pressure each time they do review that every 3 years, that the contribution rate will increase, but not to such an extent that it would put ourselves into any difficulty. So I'm extremely confident, Alan, is the short answer to your question earlier about the pension fund. And yeah, a bit like with if we didn't sign the management agreement, partnership agreement, if the council's section 151 officer didn't sign that letter of representation, we would no longer be viable, and external audit would say so. So going Going back to
sorry, David,
sorry.
Just to there, Alan, are you satisfied with that answer?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, carry on, David.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, going back to the management accounts. A couple of things I said last time is that we were going to. In fact, I asked you for permission to via £500,000 across from where we were already seeing an underspend on planned maintenance because of the impact of the pandemic, into what we thought we would be making a provision for, which was, if you like, the arrears that had built up of repairs. And yeah, I asked for permission to shift £500,000 across. As it turns out, when we talk to our external auditors, their view is that we shouldn't do that, that we should just absorb it as it arises, that there is no liability until somebody reports a repair, even though we know there is a backlog. And actually, the experience so far this year has been that we are just about managing, as Sean will talk about in more detail later. So it was only ever an estimate, but in effect, that has pushed our surplus up from what I told you at the last meeting as 2 million to about 2.5 million in terms of our day-to-day operations. But when I broke that down, I thought, well, this is a bit considerably high. What it turns out to be, there's about 1.5 million of that is actually related to the delays in actually doing stuff for various services for our tenants because of the pandemic. So we've actually spent less on maintenance, less on lots of little things, which I can go through in detail, but yeah, anybody wants to know. The other 1 million or so is the £1 million that we knocked out of this year's budget. For those who were around in January, we did knock out about £1 million worth of savings, and that is almost exactly in line with what's actually happened. So once you strip those two things out, there will be not that much left. So, you know, I was a little bit concerned that, yeah, yet again, we're reporting a very big surplus. In fact, once you look at the detail, the surplus isn't that much at all. So if that's okay, I'll move on to Padley. I was rather hoping that by today we would have a formal agreement with Padley. We're almost there. Myself and Claire are talking to their trustees about just a couple of words, really. So we expect to be able to sign that off in the next couple of weeks, hopefully next week. What we are doing, and Claire's teams are on this, is identifying the next round of properties that we'll be able to hopefully buy from the council and hand over to Padley to manage. So again, it's going extremely well as a project. And don't have any worries about it, but obviously we've got to get it's a bit like with the management agreement, partnership agreement with the council, we've still got to get all the documentation actually signed up. And then lastly, I thought I'd bring to your attention some of the stock changes that we had last year between ourselves and the council. Net, the council did lose a few properties. It's still the best overall result that we've had over quite a long time. In fact, I think there was 1 year when we actually had a net gain when Parklands View was opened. But other than that, we have lost considerable numbers every year, despite trying to replace as many as possible. But the good news within that is that apart from 3-bed houses, every other category has either stayed stable or actually increased. And in particular, larger family homes, 4 beds plus, that we did with the council target an increase if we could manage it. That has actually increased last year, which I find very helpful in terms of trying to get the balance of the stock better than it has been. So those are really just for information, but obviously try and answer any questions on any of those parts as well.
Okay, thank you, David. Any questions? Comments to David? Okay, we can approve the report. Thank you. Right, over to you then, Sean, for property update.
Thanks, Chair. The first item's the usual one, the new build update, and you'll see a lot of detail on Appendix 1 that gives you a breakdown on a site-by-site basis. And hopefully on that appendix, you'll see gradual, incremental, small steps of us getting towards building out some of those sites. So the details on there, and if anyone's got any interest in any one of those in particular, then I'm happy to take questions. If you want to email anything through to me or get any detail, I can do that for you. The second section on the new build gives you a bit of an update in terms of what the development team have been up to over the last few weeks and months. So they're the team that work behind the scenes, making sure that we've got architects employed, that we've got plans in place, and that we agree the brief, and that we deal with a lot of the prickly detailed items which happens before you get a soil in the ground. So just a few of the schemes that they are dealing with at the moment. So Crompton Street garages and Bladegrieves Avenue shopping, the Bladegrieves Avenue and Oakland's flats that we're proposing to build there. They're in the process of negotiating with leaseholders to enable us to progress those two sites. And that can be straightforward in some cases where leaseholders appreciate the fact that taking away parts of buildings that often aren't used or aren't in use, and see the benefit of them not having to be responsible for the maintenance of those moving forward. Whereas on one of the other sites, we've got a leaseholder that's kind of holding out for a bit of a ransom. So we work closely with the estates team on that. So the development team will be managing those sort of negotiations in terms of being able to make sure that we can free up the land that we need on those two sites to build those sites out. Bretton Avenue, Lucy will be aware of the Bretton Avenue bungalows. We've agreed that we're going to bring on board a consultant to help with the consultation process out there. In my view, and I think everyone would agree with this, it's absolutely key that we keep the local community on board with the way we talk through the options that are available in terms of investing in their homes on that street. So I'm kind of, for Lucy here, taking a bit of a step back to make sure that we give ourselves enough time and that we make sure that we've got resources to be able to do that. So there'll be a further briefing session with ward councillors, Lucy, so you're aware of that. Just talk through the key milestones that we're hoping to achieve over the next few months. But we've now got resources in place. We've now got some help on hand there, and that hopefully will mean that we get off to a really good start, lay some firm foundations for whatever options we end up delivering across that site over the course of the next few years. So I'm just pleased that letters are about to go out to actually explain to residents and tenants that that's going to be the case there. So I'm playing a longer game that makes sure that we keep absolutely everybody on board with the options that we're going to go with there. Grange Avenue, you'll hear that site's been kicking around for probably a couple of years now. We're now at a stage where we're carrying out the low cost energy appraisal. So we're getting pretty close now to finalising the details to go to planning. We have agreed now on the entrance point. If you remember a while ago, I reported that we were asked to consider two different points of access for the site. And guess what? It was leaseholder issues that prevented us going in the way that we're asked to consider. We're back to the original point of access now. We're carrying out a survey to determine the suitability of ground source heat pumps for that particular development. It's certainly got the scale, and we feel as though it's got the surrounding land area to accommodate that type of technology. So it enables us to just push our eco credentials a little further. And again, as an Almo and a city council, lead by example and show what can be done in terms of eco houses moving forward. So particularly interested in that one moving forward. Barlow Street, which is the 12-unit family temporary accommodation that Claire's been desperately waiting so long for. We've actually got planning permission granted now for that. That happened a couple of weeks ago. So we're really pleased about that. And we're in the process of lining up a main contractor to build that home out. So hopefully in the next few months, we'll look at that getting started and hopefully next year see that project completed. It's definitely needed. Moving on to the next page. People are okay with that. Just a bit of an update in terms of current working arrangements. All channels are open now to access day-to-day repairs. As David mentioned earlier, we weren't sure whether there'd be a tsunami of demand. It's been more like a bit of a wave than a tsunami, and we are managing it relatively well. All emergencies and urgent work's being done within previously agreed timeframes. And it's only routine and measured work that would take normally 4 to 6 weeks. On occasion, it's having to push back a little, and we're communicating with each individual tenant where that is the case. So that's the aspect of the service that we are having to use to just manage that fluctuation in demand. And we're hoping that as we move forward, we'll see demand levels move back to normal levels, and the team will be able to cope with that relatively easily. Although it's never that easy. It's always a challenge, of course. Can't make it sound too easy. Because it's not, honestly, seriously. Anyway, I better move on before I keep digging on this one. A bit of an update on 4.3 in terms of capital works team. So a few of the things that the team have been up to. They're now, I think, on their third COVID testing station that they've provided in partnership with the City Council. I must say the lads have actually really enjoyed getting stuck into providing those facilities. It really does give them that feeling that they're doing their bit towards helping with the pandemic. So they've been very positive about that. Although I don't think we want to see a fourth or a fifth one. We're hoping that the third one is just about where we're at the moment. They've also been putting their efforts, especially over the last few months, on making sure that we're turning around some of the acquired properties. They've been slightly easier for us to work on, having less customers involved. So the risk assessments mean that we're able to make a bit better progress there. So we've seen a reduction in numbers there, and they're also on with kitchen, bathrooms and wet rooms. So all that work's now recommenced, and they're looking forward over the next few months to bring on board a new supply chain partner for kitchen units. The incumbent is making it slightly challenging for us at the moment, so we're looking forward to having a fresh selection and working closely with tenants and the workforce in terms of how we select that new partner. The last bullet point on this list, this is an interesting one, and you'll know this project's been floating around for a year or two now. I've been really careful that we get this right. This is the refurbishment of Rivermead House, our only high-rise block, and that's just typical. The phone's going off now. Hopefully it will stop. It's the danger of working from home, isn't it? So Rivermead House, our only high-rise block. We engaged a consultant to put together the brief to make sure that we're bringing in the expertise from organisations that work on these types of buildings. Some good news, that's that the external insulation and render system has been surveyed, and it's been agreed that that's going to last a further 20 to 25 years. So we've not had to remove that as part of the refurbishment work, just a few spot repairs at lower levels. And I'm really pleased about that. It's a system that I remember installing 20 odd years ago, and it's mineral fibre, it's fireproof, it's about the best you can get. I'd have been a bit gutted if we had to replace that, to be fair, but we will be replacing the roof covering, we will be replacing the air extraction units that are on the building. We're going to fit a new fire safety sprinkler system to the building whilst we're doing this work. New windows and balcony doors are going in, and I'm really looking forward to replacing the balcony fronts and the section that goes between them. All those years ago when I managed the external refurb with me, I can share this with you, we ran out of money, so we couldn't quite do the balconies, and I was really a bit gutted about that all those years ago. And now at last we're able to finish a job that I started 25 years ago. So no one tells me it takes too long to finish the job. Well, that's going to be part of the project that we're going to do there. So we're getting the tender documents drawn up, the drawings drawn up, and we're consulting heavily with leaseholders to make sure they're aware of the works that are going to be carried out there. So again, looking forward to that starting probably in a few months' time. No more lilac paint in the corridors. No, that'll be the last bit of the job, which will be a refresh inside as well. You know, inside does need to be painted in something other than lilac, which is at the moment. Just moving towards the bottom end of that, if people are okay with that, just letting you know that the fire safety work team, it's took about a year to achieve this, but they've managed to achieve their BM Trada accreditation now. So we officially have the certification through that scheme. Prior to that, of course, we've been working on fire doors, but under the absolute rule, you know, that we've got competent people doing that. We're now certified to do it. And the great thing about certification is that it doesn't really change so much the skill set of the people that are doing the work, but it helps you evidence what you're doing. And it helps you make sure that you've got a register of all the work that you're carrying out, and that you can make sure that that's captured. And that is something that absolutely is going to come down the line over the next few months with new legislation. So we're in a really good position, that we've got that accreditation and we've got that system in place, but also that we know that we've got the right skill set through an in-house team to be able to control this work as well. We know how frustrating it's been in the past with contractors that we've tried and struggled with. Now, you know, our destiny is more in our own hands in this area of work. So the team are up and running now, they're established, and they'll be replacing fire doors actually out at Milestone House over the course of the next few weeks, and working through other work that's identified either during fire risk assessments or identified through condition surveys that we're carrying out on communal areas, which you'll know from compliance we do a lot of. Which moves me neatly on to compliance update. So you've got an appendix 2, which is the usual one. I'm deciding now I'm bringing it to every board meeting because compliance is so important, not just quarterly. So this gives you the end of April update. So it would have been just before the end of April would have been due for the May meeting. And I'm pleased to say that all 6 areas of compliance are all at 100%. of course, you'll be aware of the work that we've been putting in to make sure that we're compliant on gas, and the workarounds and the exception reports that are being produced, helping us maintain that 100% compliance. There's only a handful that actually fall into that group where we're still gaining access, and all have had a number of visits. So I always absolutely make sure that total number affected, less the ones that haven't been done, plus the ones that are in the access procedure, all add up to the same figure, and it's good triangulation to make sure you're not missing anything. But we continue to work hard on compliance and continue to put together practices and procedures in the background to make sure that not only are we compliant, but we've got good systems in place for managing and completing any remedial work. We just had a recent audit carried out, and most of the issues that have been identified there are ones that we're already working our way through, but that will come through to audit committee, and David and I are still working on that at the moment. That's out of the press, really. That concludes my update, everyone. Any questions? I'll try my best.
Right, thank you, Sean. Lucy?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for all that good news, Sean. I particularly the new fire safety team. I think it's really nice that you've got.
We've got a dreadful echo, Lucy.
Have I developed an echo? I've developed an echo.
It might be yours, Mike.
Let me be quick, and I'll try and sort it out. The question I had was about the Green Homes grant, which you mentioned last time, and whether you could just update on that.
Yeah, we're about to start on site anytime now, Lucy. It's taken longer than I was comfortable with in terms of teasing out all the things like the non-confidentiality agreements that have had to be in place, all the procedures that have needed to be in place in terms of our reporting back to BAYS. But now, thankfully, contracts are signed. Our contractors chomping at the bit and ready to get going, and we should see some activity on site within the next couple of weeks. And I can't wait to reach that point where I'm standing out there, seeing the external wall insulation fitted to both our stock, but also the work that we're planning to do across the private sector, because this marks hopefully a crusade over the next few years of carrying this work out, and that's something that I'm passionate about as well in my role on, in terms of the housing hub as well. We made some good progress there, so some good stuff. Thanks.
Bob.
Sean, I'm pleased to see that the whole compliance report is 100%. So well done to you and your team. That's really good.
I say thank you for that, but I'm always very nervous, Bob. But thank you very much for that.
Be positive. Be positive.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions or comments to Sean? If so, if not, thank you very much, Sean. And we'll move on to Claire, item I8.
Thank you. So we are in full swing at the moment in relation to homeless grants. We are either bidding for them, successfully awarding them, or trying to implement those things that we put in our original bid submissions. So we are very busy on the homelessness side. I talked in my last board report about the Rough Sleeping Initiative bid that we put in. It's not included in this report. I should have picked it up in Matters Arising from the minute, but just to inform the board that we were successful with that bid, and that does bring our overall Rough Sleeping Initiative grant allocation in the city to just over £1 million for 2021-22. Other bids that are active I have included in the report, the first being the Rough Sleepers Accommodation Programme. This follows on from the Next Steps Accommodation Programme of last year. MHCLG continued to change the names, but it's broadly the same scheme. Last year we were successful in bidding for both capital and revenue to provide 20 units of accommodation for rough sleepers or those that are at risk of rough sleeping. And the beauty of that was not only could we purchase additional units, but they also came with locked-in secured revenue funding to provide higher levels of support to really vulnerable people in the city. Our Rough Sleepers Accommodation Programme seeks to expand that further with another 10 properties. And our bid is 810,000, which is a mixture of capital and revenue. The capital element being match funded through the council's housing revenue account. We are hopeful with that bid award, and we should expect to hear any time now. So we're waiting with bated breath on that. Moving over the page, we've also bid for another scheme through the Ministry of Housing, the Accommodation for Ex-Offenders scheme. We've bid for 145,000, and this is primarily focused in the private rented sector. So this is looking at those people that are released from prison that historically struggle to secure private rented sector accommodation, and if they are able to secure it, struggle to maintain it in those first few days and weeks of prison release. So our bid here is twofold. One, in terms of supporting private sector landlords to give them more comfort around those early days and try and remove some of the potential stigmas in the private sector. And our second aspect is to provide greater support for prison leavers upon release, in terms of being able to sort out some of the basics of moving into their own property, just getting the electric on, getting the gas on, getting some furnishings in the place, sorting out housing benefit applications. It can be really confusing, and I think as people are released from prison, that ability to absorb all of that at that time is quite difficult. So an additional bit of support to be able to do that, I think, will go a long way. Again, we put the bid in. We're expecting announcements in June. And with both of those bids, if they're successful, they are looking for start dates in terms of delivery of the 1st of July. So very, very, very small turnaround. So we're waiting on that. A third one that I've not included, but it's worthy of update, just so that you have the full picture, is some work that we've been doing with Public Health. So Public Health England have also launched a bid opportunity around those with substance misuse issues, and the opportunity there is for us to look to provide some navigation around the substance misuse system from those that are trained in trauma-informed care and with trained to have experience around adverse childhood experiences. Two of the key areas that we know significantly impact the substance misuse services ability to bring people into treatment. So this is much more around navigation, walking with the ultimate goal of bringing more people into the treatment system that have a history of rough sleeping. So we're working through that. The bid submission date for that is the 18th of June, and we are partnering with Public Health and others to put that bid together. I've had sight of the final draft today, and we are looking to bid in the region of 350,000 over a 2-year period. Just moving on to the bottom of page 2 of my report, I've been working with the University of Derby to try and work through some evaluation of some of our rough sleeping pathways. We've got a number of pathways running, but we do want to have some sort of external evaluation as to how we're doing. We think we're doing great. The numbers are reducing, but we know that there are areas that we want to focus on, particularly around lived experience, so that we get some qualitative understanding, not only of what we're doing well, but of what we can do better, and how people receive our services. So we are working, I'm working particularly with Professor Kate Moss, who has an internationally recognised experience of evaluating homelessness and sleeping work. So really excited about that. It's in its infancy, and I'll bring more to you as that's more developed. Just moving to the page 3 of my report. Another area that I thought was worthy of note for board was our Registered Providers Summit on the 27th of May. This is the second summit that we've ran. The original one we ran in November, and it was essentially at that time a call to registered providers to be part of the solutions in Derby in terms of the Derby recovery around housing and homelessness. Really well attended on the first time and very homelessness focused. On the 27th of May, again, was very well received. We had over 45 people on the call at any one time. We had numerous registered providers, both from the city and county, in terms of delivery. And there's a clear impetus from registered providers that they want this kind of forum. They want the ability to talk to us about local issues. And I think sometimes that's frustrated with registered providers because they have such a national footprint. But I was really heartened to see that they wanted to be part of Derby's recovery, wanted to be part of Derby's focus around how we respond to some of the challenges that may be coming down the road in terms of potentially increased homelessness as a result of some of the restrictions that are now being lifted. We did have a much wider agenda this time, so we talked about the domestic abuse bill. We had representation at the summit from the courts in terms of how the courts are going to be dealing with some of those eviction cases. And we also made an offer to the registered providers of the Call Before You Serve service, something that they don't currently access. And we are trying to promote their use of that as part of our preventative work around homelessness. And the final issue in my report that I particularly wanted to report is the performance of the private rented sector access team over this pandemic period. They're a really small team, and when I saw the performance that they put forward, I was amazed. When you think about the pandemic period, trying to move people into the private sector, which is what they do, has been particularly challenging. We've had periods where the government have advised against any kind of moving at all. We have a private rented sector that we know is contracting at the moment. People are leaving, and in spite of that, that small team have been able to make 237 positive placements into the private sector during this pandemic year. And I think further testimony to them is 119 people that were at risk in the private sector that they've actually managed to stabilise and not lose their home. And I just thought it was a really positive thing to share with the board in terms of the capabilities of some of our small, perhaps less well-known teams and the impact that they're having, particularly around the homelessness agenda. Happy to take any questions.
Right. Thank you very much, Claire. Before I take questions, is just on that last point, I think the board will agree that that is absolutely fantastic news and better than we could have expected. And I hope that you could pass on the congratulations of the board to that team for the excellent work that they've managed to achieve. Okay, I think Lucy, you were first to indicate.
Yeah, just to echo Mike's comment, Claire, I think all the partnership work that's going on with the other registered providers no doubt across the city boundary, work is happening there as well. I just think it's really positive, and the way the summit, I thought the summit sounded really good. I'd love to have been invited as well, but I think it's broadening people and getting people to make those connections. It's really good stuff. So thank you for all the things doing at that professional level as well as at the individual tenant level as well. It's brilliant stuff you're doing and your teams. But I'm just going to ask specifically about the ex-offenders bid, and you've just mentioned that the private rented sector is contracting. How are we going to suddenly find these additional placements in the private sector to meet that bid? Have you got feelers out? Is it going to be difficult?
So the private sector is contracting. It's generally contracting in terms of those that have perhaps one property that they're renting out, as opposed to some of those bigger landlords. There's still some capacity with those landlords that hold bigger stock, but there is a nervousness of those bigger stock holding landlords around taking on prison leavers for understandable reasons. And so I think that we have relationships, we know what the barriers are, and I think that our bid is an attempt to alleviate some of the concerns that landlords tell us about, and also some of our experience of what doesn't go well when people come out without the right level of support that goes with them.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Right, Rachel.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Mike. I wanted just to reinforce, the work's been fantastic in this area. It's one of the things, it's a good thing, but a sad thing that it took COVID perhaps to really turbocharge and change the way we work as a partnership system, particularly Derbyshire and in the city, about homelessness. And I think we've changed the conversation over the last year. There's a real recognition this is about vulnerable, complex people. It's a difficult ecosystem to manage. We need to do it collectively. And the level of interest that's been taken there, not just from registered providers, but also from our health colleagues and the courts and the broader system, has been phenomenal. But not to take anything away from that, I think it's fantastic and we're in a good place. I think we should be really mindful as a board that there are some real risks in this area coming forward. Obviously, the eviction ban ended a day or so ago. We are always very concerned about the impact of that on our large number of people we have in the city living in private rented accommodation. Not, the contraction is one thing, so perhaps there's a flight to sell property if you're a single owner, but also the sense of arrears building up in that sector, and that sector being quite vulnerable to eviction now. Eviction ban has been lifted, and what that might mean for increased levels of presentation around homelessness to us all. And we need to put everything around our partnership working together to try and make sure we can mitigate the worst impacts of that. But I think we couldn't be a better place to do that, which is a great thing, but I wanted to make sure that we were aware that is a real risk in the next sort of period. But Claire and the team have been phenomenal, and I think we're in a very good place. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Bob.
I think my thunder's been stolen already, but I think it's just a great report, and I fully support what's been said. And you look across the report, achievements that Claire and the team have made. But I would like to say, Claire, you said the private rented sector access team is small, but my God, they've worked really hard and what great achievements. And I think for a small team, they perhaps don't always get the recognition they may need. So I would like to say on a personal basis, brilliant, 5 stars, and well done to a small team. What can be done? Please pass that on.
Thank you. I most definitely will. Thank you.
Okay, all right. If there's no further questions or comments, thank you very much, Claire. We'll note your report and move on to A9, health and safety update. Sean, I think you're just going to take this.
I think I'm going to do it, Mike.
Are you? Oh, right, okay.
I'll mute to myself then.
Yeah, it's in my name, so I'm going to do it.
Right, okay.
I'm just, I'm going to be honest, I don't know whether I missed it at the beginning of the meeting, but did we note Ian's apologies?
No, I've noticed that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we can note Ian McDonald's apologies then, and in his absence, I'll invite Sean to recap on last week's health and safety forum.
Yeah, I'll try my best, Marie. Yeah, Ian chaired last week's health and safety forum meeting. We had it on the Thursday, which would have been the usual date. We had good attendance, probably about 17 or 18 people turned up for it. And we went through the violence and aggression stats and the accident stats and the near miss stats, and had a good debate and deliberation around, the actions that are in hand to prevent those in the future. And as always, we had a really good debate around issues at Milestone House, and we're really looking forward to the work that's going to take place over the next few weeks and months to replace the entrance doors and to upgrade the CCTV system and to renew the door entry system. And that ties in well with the issue I mentioned earlier around the fire doors being replaced as well. So that kind of fits in quite well. So we're engaging very closely with staff at Milestone House, and they're very positive at the Health and Safety Forum that they've absolutely got our support. And you mentioned earlier, Maria, I think you're going to mention it in a bit in terms of the trend. The trends.
I am.
You are. I won't steal any thunder on that, but you'll notice that we still need to make sure we're putting our efforts at Milestone House. It really is the coal face, and there are some issues there, but going so much better since we had the new, I was going to call them doormen, really, the new security. The new security in place there. They have made a real impact out there, actually, and I've been out there and met them, and they're lovely lads as well, which is great. Yeah, but we had the meeting. Ian felt that it went really well. He did get his computer rebooted halfway through, which frustrated him. But apart from that, yeah, we had a good hour talking around safety issues. That's the feedback.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Okay.
Just one correction in the report that you've got in front of you. Paragraph 4.2.1 should read in March and April, not in November and December.
Right. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Maria.
Okay. So unless there's any questions on that paper, Chair.
Yeah, move straight on to
into the next one.
Yes.
Which is the review, really, of 2020-21, looking at health and safety across the year. You'll be relieved to know I don't intend to go through every part of this report, but just picking out the main points. Accidents. In 2019-20, we had 52 reported accidents, which during the last year reduced to 25. Now, obviously, that could be down to two things. I would like to think it's entirely down to our constant improvement in processes and procedures and following up. But I think maybe it is also down to the fact that a lot of our staff weren't out and about quite as much as they normally would have been if it hadn't been for COVID. Moving on to the violence and aggression reports, Sean is absolutely right. Again, well, no coincidence, we had exactly the same number of incidents of violence and aggression in both years, but Milestone House continues to be the highest risk area of work in terms of this. And I think that is a reflection of the complexity of the residents that we have in Milestone House. And all of the work that Claire was just talking about in terms of the additional support going in for people who misuse drugs, alcohol and the such like, it will target these people and hopefully allow them to access support, which will just help them choose better behaviours. But we are certainly seeing higher risk individuals at Milestone House. And as Claire said in the notes, staff are feeding back to us that they are feeling supported with the enhanced security presence. It is a shame, but we have to protect staff and all residents within there. The rest team, who are our outreach team, dealing with rough sleepers, we saw a reduction in the incidents of violence and aggression they faced. And I do think that directly correlates with the Everyone In agenda. And what we're now seeing is the outreach team doing more of the support on an in-reach basis. Because we've now got down to such a low number of people who are either new to rough sleeping, or I'm sure that you've all seen recent press coverage of the chappie that decided to make his home on the Pentagon Island, that the number of those people that are just refusing to engage are now so low that their focus is supporting those ex-rough sleepers and maintaining the relationship that they've built up with them. And I do think, again, the reduction is all down to the credit and the success of the service. Moving down, I'm so disappointed everything's getting delayed this year. The ROSPA announcements are delayed until sometime this month. I'm feeling a little bit peeved though, because they didn't delay the submission date. We still had to have the submission in on time. As you know, we're always incredibly proud of our ROSPA reputation. And I would urge you, have a look at the document that's in CMIS, because the full submission is there and it will just demonstrate that it's far from a tick box exercise. And I think all board members would actually be proud of being associated with an organisation that has put health and safety right at the top of its priorities. Swiftly down to the bottom of page 41, on the very evening after our last board meeting, we had a fire at Rivermead House. Obviously not something that you want to be happening, but what I can reassure board members is that it certainly gave all of our emergency procedures a good testing. There was a fire. It started and was contained within one flat on the 4th floor. Our colleagues from across all emergency services responded amazingly quickly. I attended for Derby Homes, and the good news is that the building did its job. The building is constructed in such a way that a fire should be contained to its source, and there was no fire damage whatsoever outside of the flat. There was obviously some smoke damage within the corridor and the stairwell, but that was all dealt with the next day by our colleagues in Street Pride. We brought in external cleaners and got the corridor and the stairwell fit for use. In fact, it was spotless when the cleaners had finished. You'll be glad to know that the tenant of the flat and the child that was there with him at the time were both subsequently discharged from hospital with no long-term effects. They were both fine, and the gentleman has now been rehoused by us. The whole matter is now in the hands of the insurers, and I guess unfortunately insurance is always a bit of a long job, but I understand that the loss adjusters have now been into the flat, so we should see some movement going forward. But yeah, if we ever wanted a live test of whether a building performs as it should do, we had one, and we can all take reassurance from that. The only other part I'm going to mention is under training on page 42 of the bundle. To ensure that we continued with health and safety training for all of our new staff, particularly apprentices, we did hire a facility at Derby Conference Centre across the road from our offices on London Road. And within that facility, we have been able to deliver face-to-face training where it's been necessary. And that facility we still have till the end of June. And depending what happens in the next few weeks, we'll consider whether we need to extend that going forward, because it is a room that I think has a capacity, I think it's about 24 people. And it has proved very, very helpful in settling our new cohort of apprentices this year. And that's all I was going to cover, because the rest of the report's about COVID. And we all know what we've done for the last year on COVID. But any questions?
Can't see anybody indicating, so thank you very much, Maria. We'll note that and note the good news that we get on that. Right, back to you, David. A11 delivery plan, Q4 report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, this is our quarterly update on where we are with the delivery plan. And yeah, obviously this is a year-end assessment. And you'll see from the second page of the report that the vast majority of our actions have been completed despite all the disruption. The one at the top of the list that has gone red is actually not down to us at all. This Derby Homes meeting the Decent Homes standard. We were talking about the update, and we were, to be frank, ridiculously optimistic to think that the government would have published it and we could have assessed it and decided what we needed to do. Unfortunately, that timescale will be considerably longer than that. We're not really expecting anything in terms of a formal announcement of the new Decent Homes standard for months and perhaps into next year. So we'll have to await that. We'll have to defer that one. Obviously, we still want to do that whenever we can. All the rest of the ones that have slipped, frankly, and I know nobody wants to talk about COVID anymore, but they're all in one way or another related to some form of disruption or slippage relating to the disruption that we've faced. So I think, with that, I'll try and answer any questions.
Thank you, David. No questions. Okay, we can note that. And moving on to A12, which, as Jan said at the beginning of the meeting, is already been thoroughly discussed at Governance Committee. But David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, we do need to pass the recommendations if we could, particularly 2.2, because that's then included in our accounts. About that, our view is that we do, as indeed the Governance Committee did support, we do meet the regulator's governance and viability standard. We are still mostly compliant with the NHF Code of Governance 2015, albeit that we have to declare a couple of non-compliances to that one to do with our membership, because yourself and and Ian are beyond 9 years. And also because we haven't done the appraisals, which you mentioned earlier. So clearly by September we'll have done the appraisals, and if you adopt 2.3, 4 and 5, that will cover the other initiatives that we need to do to bring us up to the standard that will allow you as a board to adopt the NHF Code 2020, which is an objective that I think we would all like to move on, to be up to, if you like, the gold standard for the sector.
Okay, Lucy.
Thank you. This is obviously going in the right direction. I just wanted clarification about the two appendices and whether they will be coming back to us in September and whether they are then submitted. Because I had various comments on them, which I can share offline with you, David.
That would be extremely helpful, Lucy, if we could do that offline, because effectively those are obviously at one point I was recommending to the Governance Committee that we adopt the 2020, and the Governance Committee has recommended to the board that no, we don't, we defer it to September, and I think that's absolutely the right decision. Yeah. So these are measured against the 2020. So if you have picked up some issues that we need to address, assuming that there's nothing that we need to act on more urgently, then that would be extremely helpful to me to update them. So yeah, they were assessed. The regulator of social housing one, that won't come back because that is, as it is. Fundamentally, it hasn't changed. So it's just the NHF code that would come back in September.
Right. So it's Appendix 1 you'd like comments on.
Please. Yeah.
And Appendix 2, do you actually want comments on that now?
No, on Appendix 2,
or do we not submit it?
Appendix 2 is effectively the assessment against the 2020. So what we said in the accounts is that our assessment last year still stands, because frankly nothing has changed against the 2015 standard this year.
Okay, it's just on there are things like there's a comment that meetings are now held on Skype. Well, we're clearly on Teams today. We probably will be on Teams next time. So there are things like that if it's going anywhere, you might want to do little corrections like that before you send it off.
No, thank you. I mean, it doesn't get sent off anywhere, Lucy. So
that's fine then. In that case, I can forget about it.
Yeah. If you've got anything that you need or you feel that ought to be coming back, that'd be great.
The first one, then I will share with you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
So no further comments. Can we agree the recommendations in this report? Okay. Thank you. Moving on very similarly then to A13, again, something that was thoroughly discussed at governments. David.
Yeah, and again, Chair, we've adopted every comment that was put forward at the Governance Committee. So I'm hoping that you'll just be able to approve this without any further consideration, but obviously happy to answer any questions from anybody who wasn't there. Or indeed anybody who was there.
Lucy. You're still muted, Lucy.
Sorry, I'm struggling to turn over the pages fast enough, but there was one paragraph which was talking about the, oh, hang on, it might be the following one, because there's another paper as well, isn't there? Sorry, wrong paper, I'm behind.
Are you sure? No, we are on the second paper on this, Lucy. We are on A13.
Oh,
governance arrangements. There are 3 sections to the governance arrangements report.
It's the operational board. We had that really complicated paragraph which David went away to reword. Here we are, 1.5.7 it is now at the bottom of page 164.
Thank you.
And the I think it needs main in front of board in that second line of point 2.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
trying to catch up.
Yeah, that would be consistent with the two lines further
The
down.
main board, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's main board then, isn't it?
Yes.
Just to be pedantic and clear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Lucy.
No problem.
Okay. With that amendment, can we accept this as well? Okay, if we can move on then to item A14, which is my report on the Managing Director's appraisal process. As I said at the last board meeting, Maria and I met to agree some targets for the coming year. You'll see those in Appendix 1. We've looked at the main areas, the important areas of working that we'll be involved in, which is the white paper and building safety customer service. Then looking on to the developing the partnership working following the hopefully successful signing of the partnership agreement. Then to look at the impact of what has happened in the last 12 months about the effect on young people and looking at to develop employment and training opportunities, and finally something there to boost our reputation, to build on the work that we do nationally and get some recognition for it. You'll see there that those are the main broad brush targets. For each one there are some specific success criteria to show whether it's been achieved or not, and it's recommended in 4.6 that there will be a mid-year review, but also that the board will be kept updated on progress on this. Any questions and comments? Yeah, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you. This looks nicely succinct, getting it all onto one page. I think that's a good manageable thing. Just 2 comments on it. One is related to target 2, second bullet point. And I think establishing effective collaboration with all council partners might be more than is actually achievable.
Yeah.
You know, on all to do with transport and economic development and nationally, and might be a bit much. So I think all relevant council partners.
Okay.
Or something
Yes,
similar.
I'm happy to accept that amendment if Maria is.
And
yeah.
And on target 3, I just think for clarity, if we took out the first hour tenants, and then I shouldn't then say tenants, so it's for tenants and young people living in, and I don't think it should be our properties, which could mean just our 100 and something homes, but all our and council properties.
Again, that's good clarification. Thank you, Lucy. I'm happy to accept that amendment.
Thank you. Okay.
With those amendments, can we approve this? Thank you. Item A15 then, forward plan of agenda items. Can we just note that? And 16, disclosures under the Insurance Act. As usual, there are none. That ends the non-confidential part of the business. Paul, can you